I hope you'll enjoy journeying to Italy with the 7 of us. There were 7 in our group, Baba's magical number. But first of all, I want to thank Baba for inspiring me to put this show together and for providing such a wonderful place as the Circle Center. This is all Baba's, and as you probably know, because of his grace, the Circle Center has been serving Mayor Baba for well over a year, almost 2 years, to serve the local Baba community and other Baba lovers who tend to drift in now and then. So, thank you, Baba. Thank the Circle Board and all of its supporters. I'd also like to thank 2 friends without whom the slideshow wouldn't be as it is. First of all is Lenita Silviera, who many of you know. She was one of the pilgrims on our trip, and she took pictures as well as I did. She went to some places that I didn't get to. There were times when my camera wasn't working. So Lenita kindly loaned me some of her pictures. Second, but certainly not second place, is Tony Zoyce. There you go. Without whom this slideshow wouldn't have happened, at least as nice as it is, because I had a hodgepodge of pictures. Tony helped me put it in this format. So, again, thanks Lenita and Tony. Lenita's now in Brazil for a couple months. Before I start, I want to tell you, and excuse me for reading, I didn't want to stumble through it. Before I start, I want to tell you briefly about the way Baba orchestrated our journey. I'd been to Assisi several times, and over the years, Jen and Paul and I had talked about our love for Assisi. Knowing of my love for it, and knowing that I had said I couldn't go there anymore because I couldn't handle my luggage on the trains, because I didn't have the energy because of my lung problems, Jen and Paul decided they'd plan a trip. And originally, and it was so I could get back to Assisi. And Paul said, don't worry, Ann, I'll carry your luggage. I'll load it on the train and take it off. And when we go to the cave, I know there's that place where there's a landslide, but I'll carry you over it if I need to. That was why I said, sure, I'll go. Okay? And so we went. Well, before we went, Baba had other ideas. A week before we were to leave, Paul had rotator cuff surgery. Now, if you've ever known anyone with rotator cuff surgery, it's months of sheer agony. Paul went. But as far as helping me, forget it. He couldn't, okay? So, I went. Me with my balance problems, I took 2 canes so that I could walk without falling. Because some of you may remember when, not too long ago, I was using a walker to walk. So I took my canes thinking, okay, I'll be okay, forgetting about my lungs. Well, that's another story, I'll get to it. I didn't know this, but during the trip, and some before it, all 7 of us had health problems. Some occurred on the trip, some before, but we all decided to go. And what came to me as I was thinking about this when I was over there was like Baba was giving each one of us a hair shirt to wear to remind us of St. Francis. So remember him, we did. Then on the 2nd day of the trip, we flew into Rome. We started out on October 14th. I joined the group in Atlanta because I drove there to leave my dog with my daughter. We left the 14th, flew into Rome, and spent like a day and a half there before we took the train to Assisi. Well, how many of you have ever been to Rome? How many of you have taken the train from Rome someplace? Okay, there is these numbers of tracks, like, it seems like hundreds of tracks, and you don't know till the last minute which track your train's gonna leave from. Well, we were at this end, because that's where the sign was that told us where what track our train was going to leave. Well, wouldn't you know it, ours was the last track the other way. Now, how far is that? Half the length of this mall. Okay, here's me. I mean, there's 7 of us, right? Here's me with a 40-something pound suitcase and a backpack. And we had to rush to get to the train. So we're rushing along. And I was the last one. They didn't know how bad I was suffering. When we finally got to the train, I was, couldn't breathe. I had an asthma attack. But then Baba provided. We got on the train, they loaded my luggage, and wouldn't you know it, he arranged to have an acupuncturist and a nurse in our group. And they calmed down my breathing, and they calmed down my heart. And from then on, I didn't have to worry about my luggage because other people knew I couldn't do it, and he took care of it. And they took care of me for the whole trip. In fact, and you'll see in some of these slides, both Siena and Assisi are mountainous villages. And the streets go like this and go like this. Well, with my asthma, I could not walk up and down most of those streets. So someone had to hold my hand, hold my arm, pull me along. In one case, a particularly steep hill in Assisi, Paul said, "Grab onto my belt, I'll pull you." And this is with a cane in one hand. So, just wanted to tell you a little bit about setting the scene. Okay. Yeah. So, on with the show. Combining my slides with the Lanitas added up to about 600, or pictures. We had about 600, which I narrowed down to 166 for this. So we're going to go pretty fast, and unless you're dying with a question, I'd prefer you hold it to the end, okay?
Just one quick question. How far is the Assisi from Siena?
How far is Assisi? I don't know. Probably, it's about that far on the map.
Okay. I could travel that far.
How many hours by train?
Pardon?
How many hours by train from Rome to Assisi?
From Rome to Assisi, it's, I don't remember. I was still in jet lag and couldn't breathe. Not that bad. Rome to Assisi is about 100 and some miles. It's not very far. But you can't take a train from Rome to Assisi. You have to get off and get a bus. Or you take a bus and get a train. I forget which. Very well. Okay, here we go. First slideshow. Here we are. There are our travelers. Missing one, Deborah Mew, who was camera shy, but you'll see her later on. That's Paul Di Stefano and his wife, Jennifer Tinsman, me, and Mary Grebnick, Lenita Silviera, Barbara Umbley. Now, Barbara and Mary and Paul are all third order Franciscans. This is an order St. Francis actually set up when he was alive for lay people to follow him as closely as they could. Now, they don't take a vow of poverty, they lead ordinary lives, sort of ordinary. And they were only with us, Mary and Barbara were only with us in Assisi, and then they went home, sick, both of them. Okay.
Cheryl, it's nice to leave sunlight.
Go ahead, next slide. Next slide. Oh, there we are. Okay. We stayed, while we were in Assisi, we stayed at the Franciscan Sisters of the Atonement, St. Anthony's Guest House. Next. Here's Lenita in front of the entrance to the guest house. Next. This is another picture of the entrance. Next. This is Sister Sue. She was the main nun there while we were there. But she's been the main nun, I believe, ever since I started going to Assisi in, I think, 1993. And I have a story to tell you about she and I. I'm pretty sure it was her. When I went in, I think it was 93, I went with Phyllis Green. And we went on the way to India. We flew into London, went to Assisi, spent a few days, and then flew on to India. So we got to the sisters, and I believe it was Sister Sue answered the door. And she was very kind and sweet, and she said, "Oh, is this your final destination?" And we said, "No." She said, "Oh, where are you going?" We said, "We're going to India." She said, "Oh, why are you going to India?" And we said, "Well, we follow an Indian spiritual master." She said, "What's his name?" We said, "Meher Baba." She said, she practically jumped up and down. She said, "Oh, I know about him. I got literature about him." And then she said something that blew me away. She said, "I hope that someday I have the love for Christ that you people have for your master." It gives me goosebumps still. Now, you have to remember something you probably don't know. Jane Haynes had been there. Many, many Baba lovers have been there, both before and after our trip. I suspect she was talking about the love that was so palpable coming from Jane. Okay, so that's Sister Sue. Huh?
Did Elizabeth go there too?
I don't know. Okay, and this is just a picture in the garden. They had a beautiful garden. They also had a wonderful chapel, but it was destroyed in an earthquake. There was a big earthquake in 1997, and you'll see in a number of our slides the results of that earthquake that killed 4 people, and it was a bad one. Okay. All right, this is just a scene looking down from up on high. We were actually at the Rocco Maggiore, which is the old fort at the top of the walled city of Assisi, looking down the mountain to the new city of Assisi. There's the walled city up higher on Mount Sabazio. You go down lower, and there's the lower city. And we'll see some things in the lower city after that. Okay. Here we are at Rocco Maggiore with Paul, Mary, and Barbara. Now, Rocco Maggiore, the next slide, this is the picture we got. It's much more magnificent if you went the other way, but Paul didn't know how to get there, and we were sort of in a hurry. But this is a fort that I don't know how old it is. It goes back to pre-St. Francis days. And it was destroyed, much of it was destroyed in a war with the Perugians. Perugia is a city not too far from Assisi, where St. Francis was imprisoned after the war that he took part in and fought. Anyway, he helped as a boy when he was 16 rebuild this fort, which may have been where he got his skills to rebuild the churches that he later rebuilt. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit. Okay, on. This is perhaps the most famous building there in Assisi. This is St. Francis's Basilica. This was 2 different churches built one on top of each other within a year or 2 after St. Francis died. Nowadays, we hear about people being sainted 100 years after they died. They knew St. Francis was a saint when he was in the body, or they knew he was headed that way. And within a couple of years, they built this basilica in reverence for him. Okay, and this is it at night. And it's really quite a large place. Okay, go ahead. This is a statue that's new. I had never seen it in any of the times I'd been there before. St. Francis on his horse. Now he rode with his armor on a horse twice. The first time was to go off and fight a war with the Perugians. No, the first time was he got the armor and went off to fight in the Crusades. He got a little ways from Assisi and realized he wasn't cut out for that. He came back And then Assisi and Perugia went to war again, so he went to fight there and wound up in prison for a year in Perugia. And it was after that that his spiritual longing, it just flowered. But it had been all hidden before that. So that's a neat statue. This is in front of the basilica, the lawn. You can see the statue up there. Also over here on your, if you can see, they've got Pax, which is peace, just cut out of the grass. And then behind it, they've got St. Francis's cross, which looks sort of like this. It's not a Christian cross. It's got a bar here and a thing coming down. So, okay, next. Okay, this is looking, another shot of the basilica looking into the entrance. I believe that's to the upper church. Okay, next one. This is inside the upper church. It's just one of many shots. It was magnificent. And all of the walls are painted with scenes of St. Francis's life by famous painters. Many of them done by Giotto, if any of you are familiar with that. Okay, next slide, please. Look at the details on the ceiling. I mean, it's just amazing. And we saw this throughout Italy in the churches. The artistry, the devotion, it's just blows one away. Okay. This is a newer statue of St. Francis that I'd never seen before. But you'll notice in the background how faded the background is, and plaster had fallen off, because that's what happened during the earthquake. Plaster fell off and taken with it parts of the paintings. Some have been restored, many have not, because there's a disagreement among art historians whether you should restore destroyed art or not. Okay. This is a picture, and you can see the earthquake damage here. This is St. Francis praying before the cross that supposedly spoke to him and said, "Rebuild my church." This happened in San Damiano, and we'll see San Damiano in a minute. Francis, by that time, had given up everything, had even thrown his clothes back to his father and said, "I want nothing of yours, nothing of the worldly life," and went off to live the life of a recluse. And the first place he went was San Damiano. And this cross spoke to him and said, "Rebuild my church." And from then, St. Francis went on and to rebuild many churches in that area around Assisi before, I guess, he finally realized that the cross meant rebuild the Catholic Church, which at that time was incredibly corrupt. Okay, next slide. Here we have a picture of St. Francis before Bishop Guido, who eventually became a pope. He has renounced his worldly existence. He's taken off all his clothes and thrown them back to his father, who was there, who had taken him to the bishop, saying, "This is an incorrigible child. You punish him." Mm-hmm. And St. Francis just said, "I'm through with it." Gave away his clothes. And Bishop Guido was sort of sensitive to St. Francis, so he covered him with his cloak. St. Francis leaves the scene naked after he got away and went to another place that we're going to see in a little while called Gubbio from there. Okay, next scene. This is a depiction of a dream that the Pope had. In this dream, the Pope saw the churches falling down. And he saw this guy holding up the church to keep it from falling all the way down. And that's what that picture is depicting. Okay, next slide. This is the final slide of these four. This is when 2 years before he died, St. Francis went to Laverna, that we'll see after a bit, And there, in a 40-day fast that he went for, he received the stigmata, that's the marks of Christ, on his hands, his feet, and his side. And he was the first person to have ever received the stigmata, as far as is known. Other people have since received it. I'm not sure how many, but others have received it. He was the first. And he suffered with those wounds because they never healed for the rest of his life. Okay, let's go on. We're back to the Basilica of St. Francis. This is St. Francis's tomb. And I cannot tell you, I can't even begin to describe how I felt going up to that. Now, mind you, I've been to Assisi 4 times. I've been here. This time, I was maybe as far as from here to the door. I started bawling. And I couldn't stop. The tears just flowed and flowed. And part of me was sort of embarrassed that people would look at me because they just came down in buckets. But I went all around it, and it was so sweet. So if you go to Assisi, be sure.
Where is he actually buried, you pointed out?
Pardon?
Where is his body actually entombed?
It's up here. There's a crypt up here.
Okay.
So that was new for me. I'd never had those kind of tears except with Baba. But it's like my heart was being touched. Okay, next slide.
That's Joseph's.
This is another shot of it. And up there you can see where his crypt, or whatever you call it. Since most of us go in an oven, I don't know what they do. Those things are. But it's very sweet. Okay. Here we have a crypt of Jacoba di Settesoli. Now you may or may not have heard of Jacoba. How many have heard of Jacoba? Okay. Jacoba had a female body, but like Rabia, insisted she was a man. She was very close to Francis, and I believe reading that she was with him when he died, that he had sent word to her to please bring him a couple things, and she not only sent them, she came. This is a time when traveling very far was difficult. So I thought I'd get a shot of that. Okay, around St. Francis's crypt, you can walk around behind it, and there 4 of his close disciples, Mondoli, are there, and this is one of Brother Massio. I didn't take them of all 4, I think because the guard said, no pictures in here. Oh, well. So that's all about that. Okay, this I included just because this is so Italy. Street art, holy street art, everywhere you look. It is so wonderful. I mean, just imagine walking out of your house, just having a stroll and looking up, and for me at least, it's incredible. You'll see a few more street scenes. Okay. This is the Chiesa Nuevo, I think is how they pronounce it.
Chiesa.
Huh?
Chiesa.
Chiesa instead of Chiesa, okay.
Yeah, Chiesa.
Anyway, this is the new church, supposedly built over the remains of the home of Bernardo, Pietro Bernardo, oh well, you'll see his name. There we go, Pietro Bernardoni, which is Francis's father. This is, according to legend, built in 1500s over the remains of what was St. Francis's house.
So it's a church built over the old house?
Right. Okay, and then the next one. This is the oratory of St. Francis, or Piccolino. Now, again, a lot of this is legend, based on fact, I guess. But the legend of this is that that was at once a stable. And St. Francis's mother was, for some reason, in that stable when he was born. Now, Nick Principe, whom we met there, said no, it had been turned into a room of the house at that time. So I don't know. I'm nobody, I can't, I can't sort out the fact from fiction. But the story is that he was born in this stable that was still functioning as a stable. Here we're getting in around St. Francis's home. This is one of the modern day doors that had been put in an opening. The incredible amount of intricate artwork that the Italians put into everything, it's just amazing. And here, I'm sure that's St. Francis and Clare. He was probably, it looks like she's flying, but I don't know what all that is. There's the castle and stuff. But just another bit of Italian artwork related to St. Francis. Okay, Judy. This was outside his home. Imagine St. Francis, like Baba, grinding grain. Remember, how many of you have seen the grain grinder in Maribod? It's in the museum. Is the museum still there?
Yeah.
I haven't been there since '96, so I don't know. But Baba used to grind grain. And I guess St. Francis ground grain. I was amazed when I saw that. Okay. All right, this is a picture of St. Francis imprisoned. Now, when Francis lived with his father was a wealthy cloth merchant, traveled to France a lot to get fancy fabrics and bring back to Assisi and sell. Francis was not a very good son to his dad after a while. For a while, Dad was training him so he could take over the business, and it was fine. Then Francis got struck with some of these other impressions, like, let's give away all my dad's money. Oh, let's give away his fabric. Oh, let's use the money and give it to beggars. And Francis's dad had a really hard time with that. So he locked him up in one of the rooms. I don't know if he put that obviously is not, doesn't go back to Francis's time, but he locked him up in a room. And I believe he had him tied up or had him in chains, but his mom released him. His mom was a French woman who was very nice and kind of noble. His dad was kind of a gruff craftsman. But there he is in his prison. Okay. Okay, here we are. The carcery of St. Francis. Oh no, it says carcery. No, this is just a sign saying this is the home of St. Francis, or something like that. I can't read ancient Roman. But there's-
Incarcerated,
Huh?
where St. Francis was incarcerated by his father.
Okay, yeah, that's good because it's right over that thing I just showed you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the little alley outside of what was supposedly St. Francis's home, and the street is called Pietro Barnardoni, and we'll see a sign later on. It was just a lovely little place. We walked down here and saw some of those things that you've seen over on the left, the doorways and stuff. We walked down, and then we went down into that little room where the cloth merchants, the cloth workers worked. So it was a very special place. Okay. And this is just another example of the artwork. There's Francis and Claire and a dog and a cat. It's in stained glass, but unfortunately no light was coming through it, so it came out dark. Okay. Here, as we went down those steps, we come to this room, or actually there were a couple rooms, where the workers had worked. And they had it set up with all sorts of displays, and I just took a picture of the nativity that was down there. Just more of the wonderful artwork that they have. Okay, here we are. And some of you may recognize, there's Paul, Nick. He left because he didn't want to see that picture of his fat gut again. That's what he told me. Jen's behind Nick, there's Lenita, and then Mrs. Mary and Barbara. We're in a very special place. The next couple slides will also be about this. If you remember, Baba was here in 1932. I think it was 32, after he was in the cave. Remember the story of Baba's going to the cave that St. Francis had been in and meditated for 24 hours? Well, oh, you moved on. Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's okay. We can move on. This is Via Pietro Barnardoni. The street was named for St. Francis's father. But the place where the group was standing, on the next slide, we can go on to it, is the home of Bernardo Quintavella. He was St. Francis's very first disciple. He was wealthy, he was an attorney. He had been a friend of Francis's. In fact, many of his early disciples had been friends of his when he was wild. He was like the playboy of Assisi. He was the head of the playboys of Assisi. Before, much like St. Augustine and not St. Catherine, but St. Teresa, they had kind of wild early lives. Well, I guess working out some early samskaras, old samskaras. But Bernardo, this is his home. And St. Francis was a good friend of his and used to go there and spend the night sometimes. But one time at least, because this is what Baba said, when he brought the people by this place, he said Francis had sat on a stone right here in front of Bernardo's home and wept all night for his love for Christ. So I figured I'd sit there and get charged. So, okay, here we are at a wonderful restaurant Nick told us about. And it's way off the beaten path. It's in the woods. You'd never know it existed. We went there, and the woman, those are the only tables. She was the owner, she was the cook, she was the dishwasher, the waitress, and she had had fresh mushrooms picked that morning and served it with fresh pasta she just made over cream sauce and wine and bread and served it to us. So good. She had also served Bao and whoever he went with him when he went to the cave several years ago. Well, obviously Bao's been dead several years. But at one time he went at least once, and the woman who runs that had served him. Okay. This is my favorite spot, aside from the tomb of St. Francis. This is the entrance to San Damiano. This is not in the walled city. You have to walk partway down the hill toward Lower Assisi to San Damiano. This is the church where Francis heard the cross speak to him and say, "Rebuild my church." And it is so full of just wonder. Okay, let's journey through San Damiano. This is the cross, supposedly, that spoke to St. Francis. Now there's one that looks just like it in St. Clare's Basilica. Which is it? Which? I don't know. Because some people say it's the cross in St. Clare's, some say it's the cross here. I have a replica of it in my living room. I don't claim that it was the one that spoke to St. Francis. Anyway, this is in San Damiano, and again, notice the earthquake damage of the paintings and so on. Okay. The cloister with its simple charm is a haven of peace. Clare, in September 1240, confronted the troops of Saracens led by the Emperor Frederick II of Germany, who entered the cloister. Claire ordered to be brought, infirmed as she was sick the last 26, 28 years of her life, to the door facing the enemy. And she was preceded by a small silver box in which the body of Christ was kept. I'm not sure about that.
Sacrament host.
Huh?
The sacrament host.
Okay, the sacrament of it. Okay.
Imagine.
Oh yeah, those little round wafers. The Saracens, struck by the force of her prayer, very quickly left San Damiano. I mean, just with her prayer alone, she turned back this force that came to invade. And I bought a picture or a statue of her, and she's holding the lamp that she must have held while she had the wafers or whatever. Just amazing. Okay, let's go on. This is just one of the many crosses you see, not only in San Damiano, but through all the churches. Some of them are so magnificent. I mean, they just speak to you. And then some of the artwork, there's Clare and St. Francis in the stained glass windows. Everything is so tastefully done. Okay. Here we just have another piece of artwork. This is in whatever you call it. It's a round thing up top. And again, you see some of it's faded. I don't see any chunks, but the Madonna and Child. It's right over these, it's where the choir used to sing. And the nuns. St. Clare started an order called the Holy Clares. That doesn't ring. Huh?
Four Clares.
Poor Clares, thank you. I knew it, but it escaped me. That's why I had notes. But you can actually, or I actually went and sat in some of those stalls, you know, because I do that, and just to get the charge. Okay, next one. Okay, this is another picture of the stalls. We're still in San Damiano's, and I went down the stairs, me and my cane, very steep stairs and very narrow. They weren't much more than this. And very steep stairs, but it was worthwhile going down to see what was there. And the next slide will tell us. This is the place of community prayer that I went down to. All is preserved as it was. The stalls and the lectern of rough-cut oak. The place is a poignant testimony to exalted poverty. Here we can find the secret of Clare, her prayer. On the left wall, well, it talks about the artwork, but I didn't take pictures of that. Then we climb the steep stairs. And to the right is a small garden said to be Clare's, and then the oratory. And I didn't have a picture of that. But here we have a picture of Clare and her nuns deep in prayer, with the angels flying above. She had, for those, how many of you know about Clare? Some of you apparently don't. She was a young woman when Francis left to become what he became. And he started his order of Franciscans. Clare was the daughter of a wealthy family in Assisi. She had watched from her window high up above. St. Francis, when he came after he'd converted to this spiritual being, he would preach to the townspeople, he'd preach to the birds, he'd preach to the rocks, but he was around. And Clare would watch from his window, from her window in her house, and became very drawn to Francis. After he started his order, he and his monks had a place down by, that we will see, down by St. Mary degli Angeli. And Claire ran away one night. She escaped through the death door. Italian houses at that time had doors in the walls that weren't very big, and it was called the death door. Only I don't know how you say it in Italian. That's where they put the dead bodies. When somebody died, they went out through the death door. And that was how St. Clair escaped from her family home and ran down to St. Francis and said, I want to be one of your nuns, or whatever. And he accepted her, and at that time they cut off her hair and gave her a makeshift Poor Clare's outfit. And then her sister came, Agnes. And by this time, Daddy and the brothers were all upset, so they came down to retrieve them. They couldn't budge him. They couldn't budge Agnes. Claire said no, she wouldn't go. And they tried to pull Agnes, and she became as heavy as a ton of bricks. And these strong brothers could not drag her away. So that was the beginning of the Poor Clares. She took the oath. The Pope, before she died, made this an official order, which he had done with St. Francis's order. Okay. This is a picture in San Damianos that I love so much. Every time I've been there, I've taken that picture because it reminds me so much of the women Mandali. If you look at it, just imagine Mira and Mani and Gohair. It's just lovely. I'll let you absorb that.
Who was deceased in that picture? Claire?
Yes. And here's a picture, a new picture of Claire, because I had never seen that before, and I examined everything in San Damiano. But as old artwork gets destroyed, they have artists creating new artwork. And you can see she's holding a replica of the cross that spoke to St. Francis. Okay. This is, St. Francis has more than one level. So you're going up narrow steps and down. This is the room, it's a large room, it's the dormitory. This is where the Poor Clares slept. This is the corner where St. Clair slept. She was there for the better part of 28 years. That's how long she was sick before she died. This is where she actually died. I came up the stairs and entered the room, and the tears came again. And again, a flood of tears while I was there. That didn't leave until I'd gotten out of that area. Just gifts from Baba. Okay. Here the Poor Clares slept on humble straw mats. Claire died here on the 11th of August, 1253, 27 years after St. Francis, surrounded by his last companions, Brother Angelo, Brother Leo, and Brother Juniper. 2 days before she died on the 9th of August, 1253, Claire was visited by Pope Innocent IV. He gave her the document confirming her rule. She died on the 11th, exclaiming, "Go in peace, my blessed soul. He who created you has always loved you tenderly, as a mother loves a little child. And you, Lord, be blessed, for you have created me." There's another story of St. Francis, or of Claire. The Poor Clares used to go to the Basilica of St. Francis on Christmas Eve to celebrate the Nativity, the birth of Christ. One year, and I don't remember what year it was, as Claire lay on her pallet in San Damiano, she saw and heard everything that happened in that celebration and told her nuns about it when they returned. You know that story, right? Yeah. Just amazing. Okay. This is, again, some of the artwork. And we find not only paintings and sculptures, but we find a lot of metalwork. This may be bronze or brass artwork. This is depicting her death, although I don't know if it was looked quite like that. That doesn't look like the room. But it's just exquisite artwork devoted to this person. Here is the garden at San Damiano. It's in the center. Anyone tell me what it reminds you of? Yeah, the NPR. And I was wondering if Ted had ever seen pictures of this or anyone had told him, because it's very much like the NPR. The difference is that it's one big open area with a lot of flowers rather than divided in two like the NPR. Any new people here who don't know what the NPR is? No, nobody's new. Okay, this was marvelous. Whoops. Oh, well, that's before it. We're going to see a room where Claire and her sister ate their meals. Claire's place is indicated by a cross and flowers. Claire was asked by the Pope to bless the meal, and by doing this, a cross was formed on each loaf of bread. Remember Easter? You get those special buns that have a cross on them? This is probably where that started. Okay, and this is in the cloister. Leaving the cloister on the left-hand side and looking from Small Bridge, you can see the garden. I didn't take a picture of this. I don't know why that's there. Let's move on. Okay, so this must be that room. But there again, some of the ancient artwork that is so incredible. Okay, here we are. And I guess I didn't get a picture of where St. Clair sat. But you can see the picture up on the wall of St. Clair, and well, that doesn't look like nuns, that looks like men. Oh well. Okay. And here's St. Clair holding up the lantern as she faced the Saracens and chased them away. Okay, now we are leaving San Damiano. Can anyone tell me where this is? Nada. This is the Hotel Windsor Savoy where Meher Baba took a bath. In 1932, if you remember, Baba went to Assisi to spend time in the cave. And he took some of his mandali with him. They stayed here. Baba didn't stay because he spent all 24 hours, or 23, he finished up a little bit early, in the cave. But when he got down, he came down with them, and it was an arduous journey down the hill because it's a really steep mountain. I would never try to walk it. And he passed down the Pietro Bernardoni Street and past Bernardo's home, where he pointed out where St. Francis sat and cried for love of Baba. Then he went to this hotel and he took a bath. And thanks to Nick had told me this trick earlier when we had lunch in the piazza, which I'll show you in a bit. I went in, I was with Deborah Mew from California, and I went up to the front desk and said, "Excuse me, my godfather was here in 1932, and said, can I please look around?" And she gave me free run of the whole place. So Baba's my godfather, right? So these are just a few shots of the place where Baba took a bath and what it looks like today. I have a lot more slides, but I just wanted to show you a few. And this is, I don't know if this goes back to Baba's time or what, but it's an old calendar, and it's incredible. But it's just hanging on the wall, and there must be some reason for it to be there. Maybe it's to commemorate Baba's time there, without them knowing it. Okay. Those are the stairs. If the mandali had a room upstairs, then Baba must have walked up on these because they're marble. Okay, and the next one. This is a floor plan of the Windsor Savoia. And there's the last shot of it. Notice marble floors, a lot of marble in Italy. Floors and everywhere. Okay, now we're at the carcery. This is up Mount Sabazio from Assisi. Assisi's on Mount Sabazio, partway up. The Hermitage is further up. Now the Hermitage was, I forget what it's the home of prisoners, but which means something,
If it's monks?
okay, Passion of Christ. Here we go. The Hermitage of the Prisons. That's what it was named for, and what that came from, I don't know, but it was owned previously by the Benedictines. Now, the Benedictines are an old order that started in like 500, 550, one of the earliest orders of monks. And they had given St. Francis the Porziuncula that we'll see in a bit. They had given him this, but it wasn't like they sold it to him, because he wouldn't accept anything. He had a vow of poverty, and he wouldn't own anything. So they loaned the carcery to him on a permanent loan for a yearly fee. Anybody know? A basket of fish. And to this day, I believe they're still giving the Benedictines a basket of fish every year. Okay, the carcery is you have to go through the carcery to get to the cave, unless you're brave enough to go through the woods, which very few of us are. This is a view. It's an exciting view of part of the carcery, looking out. It's all wooded around there. It's incredible. Okay, the next scene. This is also the carcery, the upper level. You go through many levels, well, 2 or 3, before you get to the path that leads you down to the cave. Okay, next. And here is inside one of the little, whatever. And again, you see the earthquake damage and the reverence to Christ on the cross. And go back one.
Sorry.
This, I believe, existed as a stall or something when St. Francis was there. He didn't build it. Remember, this came from the Benedictines. But it was there, I believe, in Francis's time. Okay, next. This is the most special place. I didn't cry here, and I'm kind of surprised why. They now label it the Grotto of San Francisco. Whatever. This is a little place where he slept. Now, St. Francis was a little man. And to get here, big people couldn't go. Cliff, I don't think you could get there. I had to hunch over and go sideways to get into it. Me and my cane. And it's so sweet. And there's a little rock raised for his head. That's where he slept. He came here a lot and did his meditation and prayer, stayed for days and weeks on end. Okay. And then you exit the Hermitage, and there's a path out back. How many of you have been to the cave? Okay, this statue is relatively new. It wasn't there the first or second time I went to the cave. This time, as the group was ready to go to the cave, Paul looked at me and said, I think Jen too, maybe they all, and said, Ann, we don't think you can go. And guess what I said? You're right. There's no way I could have made that trip down to the cave this time. So the pictures that we see now are all from Lanita. I have my own pictures of the cave because I've been there a number of times. But I wanted this to be fresh from this trip, October of 2017. Okay, so that's just a monk lying there. Then we follow this path, and it's twisty, turny. It goes over this place where there was a landslide in the 1997 earthquake, and that's treacherous, and it's a real treacherous path, and now that it's better marked than it was when I first went there in '93. But you're going through the woods and you don't know if you're going right, but I had a map, because in the library, there's a manila folder in the back of the librarian's office that if you ask to see it, inside there's an article. I forget who did it, but someone who'd been to the cave in the 40s or 50s, and he did the map and wrote the story. And so I had a picture of it, and also a picture of what the cave would look like inside if I managed to get to it. And when I got to it, it looked like that. Okay. This is Baba's cave. It doesn't look like most of us think of as a cave. It looks more like a lean-to. It's at the end of a trail, and this, I think it's gone now, but there used to be a little gate here that would open up. And then we have we have a couple shots inside it. Here's one. Now, when I first went there, back in '93, there was nothing inside the cave except two things that were there that had been when this article was written many years before. A wooden cross, like a couple of sticks bound together, and then a little frame that happened to be empty, a metal frame. That's all that was in it my first trip. My second, I got inspired to leave my very favorite Baba necklace there. And believe it or not, it wasn't there the next time I went. The next time I went, the cave was full of Baba cards, Baba pictures, Baba stuff. The next time I went, the cave was full of love letters and stuff the world had discovered it. So the Benedictine monks who own that property have started cleaning it out. So that when they went this time, they just saw a couple of Baba pictures that had been tucked in there since the last time the monks had been there. But this was this time, and then there's one other picture. Whoops, I guess you saw both of them. There were two things of Baba there. And this is Paul and Jen, not in the cave, but outside it, because there isn't that much room in the cave. Nor are there seats, unless they were put there since I was there. Okay. Now, we went up, I forget where we went. No, this was on the way down, but I forget what's up there. We'll have to see the next slide. This is a picture looking down at the Umbrian Plain. Oh, I think I know. Go ahead to the next slide. It might. Go ahead. I thank Judy, too, for doing this. Okay, here we get some street scenes. Oh, I know, that was a scene coming down from the cave, from the Hermitage, going down to Assisi. This is the main Piazza del Comune in Assisi. And if you'll notice, that street's a bit steep. They were all a bit steep and really hard for me. And you can see the architecture. This is another example. And over here, there's this neat restaurant where we first met Nick. He was sitting out there talking to some of the Italians, because Nick had been there already for a month or two when we got there. This is the main part of town. It's also, we'll see the Temple of Minerva in a slide or two. This goes back to Roman and Etruscan times. Okay, so it's really ancient. And Assisi itself is very old. It was founded by Etruscans and Assisians. And I guess that's where the name Assisi came from. I did some research, but I forget a lot of the data, and you don't want to hear it anyway. Okay, here's the Temple of Minerva. It's now used, I believe, as a town hall. It's in the main plaza, the Piazza del Comune. And it's just this old Roman thing sitting, just standing there as proud as can be. Okay. And here we have a view of what it looked like in either when it was built or I guess this is probably Francis's time, whatever, because as you're coming up the hill from the lower part of town to the upper part of town, that's where this piazza is. It's here. So you're coming up right before you go onto the piazza, over to the left, there's the entrance to the Roman Forum. And it's underground. It's it's down under here. And they have a model of this in it. They also have what we'll see in a couple more slides of. This is also there. That was dug up. They're still digging, by the way, to find all these ancient treasures that are under the Temple of Minerva. And this poor lady lost her head. Oh well. This is just some really old art that was on the wall that they uncovered. And this is a shot of what the place looks like that we were walking in. And you can see the old foundations. Yeah. Oh, how did we get back there?
I was just there for dinner.
Okay, let's see what's next. Okay. This is another church. This is the Church of St. Clair. St. Clair's Basilica, you remember who St. Clair was? I didn't spend a lot of time in here because it didn't draw me, but let's see what the next slides show. This is a beautiful shot that Lenita took at night from, remember the place we were staying? Well, it had several levels, and on one level there was this sort of like sitting area where we sat a lot in the evening and had wine and cheese, and Lenita had this phone that took wonderful pictures, and this is one of the shots at night, and that's St. Clair as it looks at night. And there it is during the day, and again, looking from the guest house, it's pretty amazing. Okay. Oh, we better go. They have a cross too. I'm gonna have to go faster. I won't get through this. This is St. Clair in St. Clair's Basilica. Go ahead. They have it's a plaster or something depiction of her. Okay. This is just more of the steepness. The street scene of the steepness. Okay, there's Lenita in front of San Rufino's. That church goes back to the 1100s or before, named after St. Rufino. And inside there's a big fountain. It's the baptismal font that both St. Clair and St. Francis were baptized in. It was the city church. Okay. Now we've left the walled city and we're down below into the town of Assisi that's down below. This is St. Mary of the Angels, otherwise known as Santa Maria degli Angeli. Let's go inside and see what's in it. The Porziuncula. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but that's how I pronounce it. This is a tiny, tiny church, no wider than this, and no deeper than from here to the piano, that the Benedictines gave to St. Francis, or loaned permanently to him, as a church. And he and his first couple of disciples lived in this church and rebuilt it. And then as his order grew, they had a village that they had right around the Porziuncula. And it is another very precious church. Okay. Here is where St. Francis died. It's also in the Church of St. Mary's. And they have, the next slide will show a painting they have depicting it, his transition. It's not very clear because a few pictures I took from books. I took pictures of what was in books because I didn't have a picture depicting it. Okay. Now, from Assisi, we went to Gubbio and Laverna, but when we were putting the slides together, we got Marzia's first. So Marzia had a farmhouse on another mountain across from Mount Sabazio. Okay, she bought it from Valeria that Nick was talking about. It used to belong to Valeria. And we just went there for 3 days of R&R. We're up on this mountain in this old farmhouse looking down on this valley. Okay. This is a picture of one of the buildings. This is the farmhouse. There are other buildings there. It's a very lovely place to stay. Okay. There's me with your dog. I forget his name. Okay. And Paul had rented a car, and he took us on a trip to the top, very top of Mount Sabazio. It's another mountain, the next mountain over, to see this herd of hundreds of wild horses. This is a shot of them. They were magnificent.
White Horse Avatar.
Yeah, the white horse avatar, and there's his horse. Okay, next slide. This is Lanita as we're up there, looking out across the Italian Alps. Just, I mean, this whole trip was so incredible. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Gubbio. Gubbio is, there's Nick, in front of the church, forget what it was called. Okay, well, we didn't stay there. We didn't go inside, so let's move on. You know, okay, but here's the part that I wanted to tell you about. There's a legend about Gubbio. The legend is that, well, Gubbio was a walled city like Upper Assisi. And the legend is that outside the walls, there was this wolf that roamed around and scared all the townspeople. And St. Francis heard about it and came and talked to the wolf. Said, "Why do you frighten all these people to come out?" He says, "Because I'm hungry." And St. Francis said, "Well, in that case, I'll take, if you promise not to bother the people, I will make sure you get fed all you want for the rest of your life." And the wolf said, "Okay, hey, such a deal." So St. Francis took him in, introduced him to townspeople, told the townspeople they were to feed the wolf for the rest of his life. The legend says they did. And throughout Gubbio, you have statues of St. Francis and the wolf. Now, if you talk to Nick, he has a different story. He says that there really wasn't a wolf, that they dug up the spot she was supposed to be buried in, and it was a woman. And he thinks that that story was about a Mastani. I don't know. Oh, here we are. Yeah. That's Deborah. I told you you'd see a picture of her. She's doing her exercises by the statue. The statue's in the back. There are several statues of the wolf in St. Francis, by the way. Okay, now we're going to see another church. This is another really special church in Gubbio. The only church in Gubbio with a nave and 2 aisles. It was begun immediately after the death of the saint on land owned by his friends, who had given him sanctuary when he fled Assisi after publicly renouncing his father's worldly goods. Remember, I told you he fled when he got rid of all his clothes and gave them back to his father. He fled to Gubbio. This is where he fled. Okay, that's enough of that slide. This is the church. It's a tiny church, not as tiny as the Portiuncula, but we'll go inside and see a couple shots here. It's just a tiny, sweet little church, again with earthquake damage, because you find that all over that part of Italy. They get earthquakes. In fact, I was looking before we went, watching. There had been hundreds of earthquakes in that area this year, or in 2017, but none of them had hit Assisi. Okay, now we go to Mount Laverna. We've heard, and this is a picture from a book. because I couldn't get this scene. This is a place built up to honor where St. Francis got the stigmata. And it's high in the mountains, about 100 miles or more from Assisi. We rented a van and took a day trip to Gubbio and Laverna. Okay, and I had a wonderful meal there. Our driver had arranged for us to get a private room. And that, wow, it was wonderful. So this is inside. This is part of the sanctuary that they have. And then you walk down this long, I don't know what to call it. It's not a hall because it's not enclosed, but it's got a roof over it and one side is a wall. And there are these wonderful paintings, which unfortunately people have written on, but there's one of St. Francis resting. And here he's got the stigmata. Go ahead. There he's getting the stigmata. Go ahead. And this, I'm not sure if this is the final sanctuary. I don't think it is, but this is one I got of Lenita's head before my camera died. Okay. Now we went from Marzia's, remember we went to the other two places where we were still in Assisi. Now we went to Siena, where Catherine of Siena is from. Remember Baba's 4 favorite saints, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Teresa of Avila, and St. Augustine of Hippo. I've been to all 3 places, but not Hippo. I don't want to go to North Africa right now. Okay, this is Lenita and I just getting off the train in Siena. Here, we walked up the hill and we were hungry, so if you look, you can see Jen and Paul and Lenita. That's where we ate. We ate a lot on that trip, but we were gone 19 days. Okay, next slide. This is the little hotel we stayed in. It was quite nice. Okay. Mostly we stayed in convents, except when we couldn't find a convent. Okay, we wanted to have lunch or dinner inside the hotel, and they said there's no eating or drinking in your rooms. So we just took it all outside and had it. By this time, when we left Assisi, the 2 Franciscans, aside from Paul, had gone back to the States, so there were just the five of us, and Paul was in room 6. This is just a scene of Siena, looking across the valley. It's an impressive old city, okay? It's a wonderful place. Here we come to the Basilica of St. Catherine. Okay, let's go in and take a look. Oh, no, we're outside. We're outside looking at the Basilica. Okay. Inside we'll have just a couple shots. All right, let's go ahead. And there's, I don't know who that man is with St. Catherine. She was linked up with a St. Dominic, I think, but he was a different century, so I got confused. Okay, let's move on. I don't know about these saints. This is, again, artwork in the Basilica of St. Catherine. Okay. This is the steps going down toward lower parts of Siena. And this is another picture, and I'm not sure whether that was taken in the Basilica or someplace else. I've forgotten. Okay, that's beautiful. And notice, now I had to go up and down these streets. Here, I didn't have anyone with me because I'd lost Deborah, and the 2 of us had lost the rest of the guys. So here I am trying to walk down this hill. I've got a cane in one hand. I'm holding onto the wall on another, just so I can get up and down the hill, because they're really steep. And I was going down to the sanctuary house of St. Catherine. And here's the entrance to the place that was supposedly her house. And we'll go inside and see a couple scenes from it. These are the doors. There's this one and the next one. Now that's an apple with it looks like an apple with a bite taken out.
That's the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
It's the same with green at the top.
Sacred Heart of Jesus.
I mean, I blew that up to make sure that was green at the top.
Difference between the heart and the
You think it's the Sacred Heart? Okay, I'll accept that.
Green would just be the artery.
It looks like somebody took a bite out of it, whichever it is. Anyway, this is on one of the gates going into the house. And the next one is the other gate going in. Very fancy. Going into the sanctuary or the house of St. Catherine. These were pictures on the wall. This is St. Cat. She was one of Barbara's 4 favorite saints, as I mentioned. She's the only one of those 4 who apparently came into that life with a high spiritual standing and no earthly stuff to work out. By the time she was 6, she had her own room as a prayer sanctuary. She spent all her time praying. Unlike the other 3, all had rather wild lives when they were young. She didn't. Okay, next one. She levitated. Parents kind of scared her parents. You go into your kid's room and there they are flying in the. Okay, next one. And here's a statue to her outside of her house. Okay, let's go on. And here we are back up the hill. I'm trying to speed up because I'm talking longer than I thought I would. Okay, this is the Campo, the Piazza del Campo. This is the big square in Assisi, or in Siena. But it's not a square. It's like a big horseshoe, and it goes uphill and down. And Deborah and I were there, and what we did there was eat gelato. And Deborah wanted to have an experience to see what the ambience was like, so we laid down in the square. And probably for 20 minutes, had a snooze in the square. Okay. There's another scene. There's a fountain in the back of the square, and it was wonderful, and there were all sorts of birds there, and it was fun to be there. Okay. Another street scene in Siena. Okay, now we're in Florence. And believe it or not, yeah.
Something important happens in Siena, and that's
Horse
the horse
races.
race.
Yes, there are horse races. All Italian cities have their celebrations, and they have, okay, Siena is divided into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant has their own flag, their own identity, and they compete. And once a year they have these horse races and other things of competition, and they race around that horseshoe. But okay, we're going to move on. We're at Florence now. This is our last city except 6 pictures in Rome. Lenita's standing in front of the guest house, the convent we stayed in. Okay, next. Here we have what their chapel was like in that convent. And then this is the Duomo. It's the Church of Santa Maria del Floria. I forget. Anyway, it's called the Duomo. It's the 3rd largest church in the world, behind St. Peter's in Rome and St. Paul's in London. This is the 3rd largest church. It's incredible. We'll see several, and look at the way it's done. Marble layered and done this way and that way. It's exquisite. Go ahead, we've got several pictures of the Duomo. And the artwork is just incredible.
Is this all the same church?
Huh?
It's all the same church?
It's all the same church, yes. This isn't. This is the baptistry of St. John. And it's right beside the church, built in the same way with the marble and so on. But the doors are made of brass, and they are exquisite. Remember that door I showed you early on that had all the figures on it? Well, this has 3 doors entering the 8-sided building, and they have scenes from the Bible, all exquisitely done. Okay, this is the ceiling in the Duomo, the inside of the dome. And here's more from the Duomo. And there's me in front of the baptistry door.
Is that an ice cream cone?
Yes.
That's gelato. I have licked my way through Italy 4 times. I love gelato. Okay, the other place we went, besides this wonderful restaurant that I didn't take pictures, we went to the Academy Gallery. And this is a Stradivarius viola, perhaps played by one of the Medici. A number of the instruments there were made by Stradivarius, and some were played by, there was one of the Medici that was very musically talented and played some of these instruments. So that was part of the exhibit before we got to what I'll show you in a minute. They also had an exhibit of pianos, early types and prototypes of pianos. So we saw like 4 or 5 different instruments leading up to today's piano. And this was one of them. This is the Rape of the Sabine Women. It was not done by Michelangelo. I've got it in my notes who did it, but it doesn't matter. It was very nice, and it's leading into the reason we went there. We went to see the David, Michelangelo's David. And we had the travel agent get the tickets ahead of time because you could wait in line for hours and hours to get in. It's magnificent. We had a wonderful guide who took us through this whole place and spent about an hour and a half with just 6 of us. It was incredible. I thought about cutting it off at the navel, but I thought these are Baba lovers. They're, yeah. Jeez. Yeah, right, Bob. Here we are eating again. You think we did nothing but eat? We're eating in an outside market in Florence, an open-air market. Now these are all pictures that Lenita took because we went to the Boboli Gardens in Florence. And I couldn't walk up the hills. I sat down below, and Paul couldn't handle the hills. His shoulder was bothering him. So we sat down below, and they went through these wonderful gardens. So you can go through them pretty quickly. This is all things they saw from the gardens. Here we are, we're going to go home. So we're waiting for the bus. And there's an actual picture of Deborah where you can see her. And myself and Jen and Renita and Paul.
And Ron, who's the next?
Well, those are other people waiting for the bus. Okay, 6 shots of Rome and then we're done, except I have an announcement. This is St. Peter's at night. Now, I didn't do much traveling in Rome because I'd been there before and I was exhausted. So these are the neatest pictures. Okay, the Pieta. If you ever get to Italy, go to St. Peter's and see the Pieta. It is magnificent. It's Michelangelo. When I first went there, you could just see it. Stand up close and see it. The next time I went, they had plexiglass in front of it because somebody had taken a hammer to it.
In Australia.
And each time you go, it's harder to get close to it. But it's magnificent. That isn't a great picture, but it's wonderful. Okay, next. This is in the back of St. Peter's. It's for St. Peter, right? Erich, maybe? Someone said that.
Well, Barbara did go in there.
Okay, he did go in
He
here.
did go in there.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I didn't know
Under
that.
the main dome,
Yeah,
dead centre.
and this comes
You
down
faced
to
each
this
direction.
thing, I don't know what you call it, that's around the opening that leads down to where St.
Rotunda.
Peter's bones are.
Probably Rotunda is what it's called.
Oh, that's the big thing, but I'm talking about this in particular. It's over where the bones of St. Peter are. And the first time I went there,
The steps go down.
I could actually go downstairs and look around. Of course, the bones are buried, you don't see them, but you can't anymore. You have to go through metal detectors to get in there, and it's much more regimented. But okay, we've got one other shot of that. That's, again, you look down and to where St. Peter is buried. And next, this is a world outside, I guess it's a world outside of St. Peter's, and I don't know anything more about it. It's an impressive big ball. You can see how big it is by that little eye back there. And this is, I think, the Tivoli Garden, Tivoli fountains.
The last picture.
That's the last picture.
Thank